Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on reframing and responding, 3 things to consider. The very first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to take some deep breaths, and you'll see why this is important later on when we talk all about safety and regulation. And I think when we all arrive at something like this, it's really important that we just kind of leave everything else outside and bring our calm, regulated selves inside. There's a lot of neuroscience to show that it is only when we are calm and regulated that we are able to learn and take in information and interact with each other. So for my sake, as well as for your sake, we're going to do a few deep breaths. And then once you know this skill, you can teach this to your young person as well. So I've put there 5, 2, 7, 2. You can use any numbers that you want. The important thing is to make your out breath a little longer than your in breath, because it's on the out breath that we regulate and our heart rate drops. So let's breathe in for 5, hold for 2, and out for 7. And hold for 2. Breathe in for 5. And hold, and out for 7, and hold, and last one, breathe in, hold, breathe out, and hold. And I hope, like me, you feel like you can feel those changes in your body already. Breathing is a brilliant way to regulate the nervous system. And it's something that we can do when we are responding to our child's behavior. And it's something that we can teach them to do in order to regulate themselves as well. So you're in the right place today if you would like to know all about changing our reactions as parents to our children's behavior, from those of threats, punishment, bribes, those kind of things which make us feel pretty awful as a parent, and change those to responding with seeing the child's need, responding to that need, meeting the need. And let's be completely honest, we're never going to get it right 100% of the time. Not that there is specifically any right, but we're never going to be able to respond calmly 100% of the time. We are human beings and we have our own stresses and triggers. So what we have to do is we have to aim to be responsive. And most of the neuroscience shows that we don't have to be at this perfect parent all the time. We have to be conscious and present and responsive most of the time, and then our children will be able to thrive. Just to introduce myself, my name is Shelley of Complex Connections, and I set up Complex Connections to support other parents in a parenting journey of an ADHD or autistic child. And I did that from my own experience as that parent. My son is ADHD and autistic. I myself am ADHD as well. And I found it a very lonely, isolating, overwhelming journey. There wasn't a lot of information available. There is a lot more neuroscience now that's coming to the fore, showing about the benefits of connected parenting. But it wasn't until I began learning about that I began to make that switch. And the benefits in my family were absolutely huge. And that is why I wanted to share this. So I've created a course which enables me to share that kind of parenting, those kind of parenting ideas. I'll share a little bit more with you about my course at the end, but for now, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about this and how we need to reframe that behavior. We can't respond if we are looking at the behavior from a behaviorist point of view. So our society has been a behaviorist society. It looks at behavior as intentional and controlled. We have the idea that the child is doing something to get something. There is a reason that they have for their behavior, and parents need to do something in order to change that behavior, in order to get the child to do what they want them to do instead. And society has had this view for a very long time. We are realizing now the damage damage that that causes, and we are realizing that behavior is something other than always intention and control. It can be subconscious, and we need to consider that when we are considering our response. We have very set judgments on behavior. We know that parents, other parents, teachers, people in general will class behavior as good or bad. Good behavior is often seen as quiet, still, controlled, obedient, conforming, listening to instructions, responding in the correct way emotionally, not being overly responsive or overly emotional, high achieving, organized, on time, and popular. I'm sure you'll recognize a lot of those. And if our children don't manage to meet those expectations, they are often labeled as naughty or lazy or undisciplined. Not only are the children labeled negatively, but the parents receive a negative label as well. They haven't done what they should have done. They haven't controlled their child's behavior. So bad behavior is often seen as noisy, active, not able to be still, impulsive, non-conformist, not following instructions, solitary if you don't make friends easily or want to be with other people, messy, disorganized, late, and sensitive. So again, I'm sure you'll recognize a lot of those terms, and obviously there's loads more, but those judgments that we make about other people, and in particular with regards to this webinar, with regards to our children, are really damaging, and we need to reframe that. We need to look at it in a different way. Tonight we're going to build a house. We are going to try to use that house to move us from reacting, which is using threats, punishments, rewards, having battles and power struggles, all the way up to responding, which is seeing, hearing, meeting the need, whilst maintaining limits and boundaries. There seems to be a misconception that when you are a connected and conscious parent, you let go of boundaries and you're very permissive, and that is absolutely not right. Children need those firm boundaries. Teenagers need those firm boundaries. In fact, we all do. We all use them to feel safe when we know what we have to do and we know what the limits are. So parenting in a conscious and connected way is maintaining those limits in a collaborative way with your child. So we are moving from that behaviorist parenting to that connected and conscious parenting, and we'll go through the various steps. We'll lay some foundations, we'll gain understanding. Those are the three things that we're going to consider. We'll alter our communication, and then we are able to achieve connection. And connection means seeing and hearing and valuing your child, letting them know that they belong, creating that safe environment for them. So reacting. When we react, we take away random things, telephones, gaming devices. I certainly did this as a parent. We think of the most high value thing that our child would not want to lose, and those are the first things that we want to remove, because we feel at a loss as to how to control our child's behavior, how to manage them. And when they fight back, or when they don't want to comply with what we're asking them to do, we have to think of the most high value thing that we can take away. This is the behaviorist view. This is reacting to that behavior. We shout, we have battles with them, we dictate to them what they are going to do, and we offer them these treats and rewards, which may work in the short term. The threat of something unpleasant or of a punishment, or the idea of gaining something, getting a reward, can help children to regulate and to manage their own behavior for a certain amount of time. But that dysregulation is going to come out at some point, because it is their nervous system which is causing the dysregulation. So using those things may look like it's working, but actually what it does is it damages connection, and it causes more of a struggle in the long term when we are not working with our child. So we are going to be reframing. We are going to be getting a new perspective on behavior. We're going to be looking at it differently, and we're going to understand it more deeply, because we can't change our view unless we understand what's actually going on. So let's have a look at that. Dr. Mona Delahook says, when we shift our perspective from my child is behaving badly to my child is struggling with something difficult, we are able to support resilience. And I would add to that, we can build connection, we can strengthen relationships, we can then collaborate and work with our child in order to get them through. And definitely it supports resilience. Building resilient children, those children feel safe, they feel heard, they feel connected to the people who are important in their lives. So it absolutely builds resilience. So the first two foundation stones that we're going to put in is that behavior is seen as a response to something. It is a form of communication, or it is an indication of how the individual's nervous system and brain are regulated at that moment in time. And it is often not even conscious. We take, as I said before, we have this idea that we can control our own behavior all of the time. We choose to do what we do, and that is certainly not the case. When we see somebody behaving, that is their body and their brain's way of regulating how they are feeling at that moment in time. So that's our first foundation stone. And the second foundation stone is that there is a mind-body connection. We must realize that neither of them works independently. There was a view for a very long time that mind and brain and body were different and separate, but we now know that what happens in our brain affects what happens in our body and vice versa. So those are the two foundation stones that we are putting in place. We then need to consider three things when we think about building understanding, and those are safety seeking, sensory processing, and sensitive emotions. And we're going to have a look at each of those in a little bit more detail. Safety seeking, we must understand that our brain is constantly trying to keep us safe, thinking about our brain's primary role as survival, keeping us safe, keeping us away from danger. We must understand that our brain is constantly looking for threats. It scans our environment all the time to work out if there is anything that is dangerous to us. And then if it finds anything, it needs to regulate that. Obviously, there are two types of safety. There's our physical safety, which would be things like having enough to eat and drink and having shelter, and our emotional safety, like feeling that we belong somewhere, that we are loved, we are important. So both of those work together, and they really are our basic needs. Yes, we need those physical things, but we also need to feel that we are valued in the environment that we are in. And if the brain detects that these things are not present, that we are not going to be able to get these things, it is going to react, and it is going to try to regulate those. In an ADHD and an autistic brain, threat and danger is often interpreted when there is something that is unfamiliar and unpredictable. So what we do need to realize that each person's perception, each brain's perception of danger or threat may be different. What I feel threatened by is not necessarily what you do. Our brains are different. We have had different life experiences. Our brains are in different states. Often a neurodivergent brain is used to getting a lot of negative feedback, and it may be constantly on alert. So danger may be seen more readily in the environment. To somebody who's very calm and very regulated a lot of the time, and their perception of danger is completely different to that. So we do have to remember that when we are thinking about brains, we need to consider that another person's experience is their real experience, even if we don't feel exactly the same way. And that unpredictable and unfamiliar is often very threatening to an ADHD or autistic brain. This green, red, and blue pathways I've taken from Dr. Mona Delahooke's books. She says that when we are on the green pathway, we are feeling regulated and safe. So a brain that is feeling safe can be relaxed, it can interact with other people, our muscles are relaxed, we may be smiling, laughing, making eye contact, we will have smooth responses, we can learn, we can take on information. So that is the green pathway. That is when our brain feels that there is no danger. As soon as our brain becomes dysregulated and feels that there is something unsafe, we move on to the red pathway, and this would be the fight or flight response. Now, these are stress responses. These are not responses that we initiate. These are responses initiated by our brain and our nervous system feeling that threat. So in this pathway, you may see darting eyes, tense muscles. You may see the child hitting or swearing, shouting. They may be very aggressive, or they may be running away from something. So the fight is the aggression, whereas the flight is getting away, moving as far away as they can from it. Avoidance is another form of flight. It's something where you don't want anything to do with what is causing you danger, and those are both stress responses. The blue pathway is the shutdown response. So that is where you may see somebody who seems really disconnected from the environment. They may be staring, they may have kind of that glassy-eyed look, they may be slumped over, they may be curled up. They will be trying to keep themselves separate from the environment. They will not want to talk or answer questions or interact. They will be really quiet. So those are the two dysregulated states that we have to watch out for. And again, remembering that they are stress responses, they are not controlled by us as such. The second thing that we need to consider when we are building understanding is sensory processing. So sensory processing is where our senses take in information from the environment and they evaluate it. They work out if it's safe or if it's unsafe. So our brain is constantly evaluating the environment in that way. Our brain interprets what we see, hear, feel, touch, taste. Those are the most common senses that we know about. And then it regulates it. And the behavior is that way of regulating the brain and the nervous system. We've talked about those 5 most commonly known senses. 3 other senses have been identified and named, and they are proprioception, which is the feedback that we get on our muscles and joints, most simply. Interoception, which is the senses that we have from our internal organs. So if we feel hot or cold, or we need the toilet, or we're thirsty, that is the sense of interoception. And the vestibular sense is all to do with balance and our position in space. So are we flying in the air, or are we standing on the ground or sitting down? That is the vestibular sense. Now, an ADHD or autistic brain may well have certain sensitivities. It may be hypersensitive, which means it is overwhelmed by senses. So, for instance, if you are overwhelmed by sounds, you find everything really loud, or the sound of a tap dripping in the background is so loud that you cannot focus on anything else. If you are overwhelmed in your let's say your vestibular sense, then anything that feels out of balance to you, if you were on a roller coaster or if you were driving in a car, that may feel very unsafe to you because you are not grounded, you are not standing on the ground. Hyposensitive means that you are sensory seeking. So you will be looking for ways to get more input from that sense. So for instance, if you are hyposensitive as far as touch goes, you may well stand really close to other people. You may want to hug people very tightly. You may want to touch lots of different fabrics and textures. You may constantly be seeking that touch. For proprioception, you may be looking to constantly squeeze things and get that feedback on your joints. If you are hypersensitive, I wanted to mention this with regards to interoception. We know that some children don't recognize when they are hot or cold, or when they are hungry or thirsty. Sometimes they don't recognize when they need the toilet, or when their heart is beating really fast. And that would be where they are not recognizing those signals which are coming from their internal organs. So that is the sensory processing, which makes a huge difference to regulation and absolutely gives our brain and our body those signs of safety or danger. Sensitive emotions is the third consideration when we're building understanding. Emotional regulation is one of the executive functions. Now, the executive functions are situated in our prefrontal cortex, which is right at the front of our brain, and it is actually the last part of the brain to develop. So the latest neuroscience indicates that the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until our mid-20s, and we know that with neurodivergent brains, they may be 3 to 5 years less mature than their neurotypical peers, and so that may be even closer to 30. So it takes a really long time for that emotion regulation to be fully developed. Regulation of emotions is literally just having a way to think about and understand how you are feeling, almost having that language to be able to think about it for yourself, but also talk about it to other people. And that self-awareness and language development is called emotion literacy. So when somebody is emotionally literate, they are able to recognize how they are feeling, they're able to talk to somebody about it, and they are able to process those feelings in a positive and supportive way, and they are able to then identify with other people who are having similar difficulties. So that ADHD and autistic brain, again, like we said, may be more immature than their peers. It may be constantly on high alert, and it may easily be triggered into dysregulation, which means that emotion regulation is particularly difficult. And I'm going to show you that now with the help of a guard dog and a wise owl. Before I do that, just to clarify where things are being controlled from, that prefrontal cortex that I told you about is at the front of our brain, above and behind our eyes, and that is responsible for our logical thinking, all the executive functions, planning, prioritization, thinking about what consequences will be, impulsivity, and emotion regulation, like we said, as well as some others. The amygdala, which is in the deep part of our brain, it's at the top of our brain stem, is one of the more primitive parts of our brain, and that part is part of the system in our brain that controls emotion. So that amygdala is constantly looking for danger. That is the part of the brain that is scanning our environment to see if there are any threats to us. When we have an amygdala hijack, it means that we are overwhelmed by our emotions. So a person who is not able to control their own emotions, who doesn't have that developed emotion regulation, may well experience amygdala hijack fairly often, as well as a person who is neurodivergent, who doesn't have that sense of emotion regulation. Amygdala hijack is when the amygdala becomes so overwhelmed by that sense of threat that it disconnects from the logical thinking part of the brain. So if we think of the amygdala as the guard dog, which is constantly looking out for threats, and the prefrontal cortex as the wise owl, when that amygdala senses danger and comes out of its cage barking and growling and being really vicious because it is feeling threatened, that wise owl is going to fly away. And that's a really great way of thinking about how that disconnection happens. When we are really overwhelmed by emotions, we struggle to plan and think and organize ourselves and think of the consequences of things. And this is really important for our survival, because if we are standing in the middle of a road and a fast car comes down the road, we need to get out of the way really quickly. Our brain needs to respond and get our body to run or jump or whatever it needs to do to move away from the car. We don't want that planning, prioritization, and consequences to come into effect because we need to take action. So as much as the fight response or the flight response or the freeze response has their place in our survival, what we're looking at here is when it's happening in what I might call inappropriate situations, but remembering that it is completely appropriate for that person who is experiencing it because of their previous experiences and the predictions that their brain is making. So we've popped in our 3 building blocks there: safety seeking, sensory processing, and sensitive emotions. Now we have a better idea of what may be going on behind the behavior. So we've put our foundations in. We know that behavior is not always controlled. It is communication or an indication. We know that the body and mind are connected. And now we know that seeking safety responding to sensory input, and emotion regulation are three things that can be behind what we see on the outside, that behavior that we see. So let's keep going and we'll see how we can change that reaction, communication and action into responding rather than reacting. So that's what we don't want. We want to change that around. We want to move away from those power struggles. We don't want to make our child feel bad. We don't want to feel bad. We want to find another way to do it. And the other way to do it is to respond instead. So responding means that we're going to be talking, we're going to be collaborating, we're going to be looking at emotions and talking about those. We're going to help our child to feel their emotions and process their emotions. We're going to come at things from a completely different point of view. And alongside all of that, we are going to regulate ourselves, and I'll show you why. The three ways that we can take action, the way that we can communicate in order to build that connection and respond as a parent, is to, first of all, get curious. And curiosity means looking at things without having assumptions and an end goal in mind. It's having an open mind and going, what could this be? I wonder why this is happening. Let me think about this differently. So curiosity is asking those questions, asking them of our child if we can. Sometimes our children are not old enough or not able to explain things to us, but if they can, and the more we do it, the more able that they will become. But it's asking those questions of ourselves and of our child. It's looking to see, what can I see in my child's behavior? What does their face look like? What kind of movements are they having? Is it those sharp, impulsive movements? Are they aggressive? Are they running away? What's going on for us here? Co-regulation is the second thing that we need to think about. And co-regulation is when we bring our calm nervous system to our child's dysregulated nervous system. So more and more neuroscience now is showing that children learn emotion regulation most effectively by co-regulation. And that means that a significant adult helps them to learn how to regulate. It teaches their nervous system how to do that. The amazing thing is that each of our nervous systems can interact with other nervous systems. So, you know, when you walk into a room and you can feel the tension or you can feel the excitement, that is your nervous system picking up on how other people are feeling. You don't have to. You pick that up before you actually listen to what's happening or see what's happening. Your nervous system picks up on that. And exactly the same way our child picks up on signals from our nervous system. So if we are able to be calm, our child's nervous system will be able to regulate, and this teaches them to be able to regulate more individually. But remember, that doesn't happen for a really long time. Just because they're 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 doesn't mean that their self-regulation is fully developed. You know, that's going to take a few more years. I actually think that even as fully grown adults, well past mid-20s to 30s, we still need regulation from others to a point. We know that if we are feeling anxious and we are with other anxious people, that makes us feel worse. But if we are with somebody who is calm and collected, then our anxiety tends to come down. Collaboration is the third thing, which I think is the way to build that connection. Collaboration is working with our child, not having that power over, not dictating to them that this is the way it's going to be done and that's it. We ask them, we work with them, we form a team, and we discuss with them how they think we could do things or what they think would help them in certain situations. And we do our best to go with that, not letting go of those limits and boundaries, putting those in place, but as many of them as we can, we make them collaborative so that our child has had some input. We all know what it feels to have input on something. You immediately more bought into it. So as soon as your child is able to work on those things with you, the buy-in from them is going to be magnified. We also we talk about emotions, and we develop that emotion literacy. We see all emotions as valid. We don't have to be happy and excited and joyful all the time. We are able and we will be angry and jealous and disappointed. Those are normal human emotions, and we need to let our child know that they are going to feel them and give them the language to talk about those. The important thing is that they process and they respond to that behavior in a way that is going to help them and support them to get through it, and in a way that's not going to harm anybody else or themselves. So we can model that to them, because we can show them when we feel angry or when we feel upset what we do about that. And showing your child how you regulate or what you do to calm yourself down can be very helpful for them. That breathing can be a really good exercise. So then we've popped in that get curious, co-regulate, and collaborate in order to build that house, which leads us from reacting to responding. And when we're responding and we've put those foundations in place, we've understood what's going on, we've communicated in a different way, we then reach that point of connection. And that point of connection is where our children feel safe. They know that they are free to be themselves, that there is unconditional love. They are safe. They will, even if the relationship is damaged at times, it can be repaired. There's always a way forward. We are always going to include them and collaborate with them whilst maintaining those boundaries. And that is the way we are able to move from being a parent who is focused on managing behavior to a parent who is focused on connection and on those conscious decisions that we are making. Maya Angelou says, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. It's very easy as a parent to feel guilty and to wish that you'd done things differently in the past. When you didn't know better, you did the best that you can. We're all doing the best that we can. When we know better, then we are able to do things differently. We are able to approach things differently because we understand what's actually going on. Then we can change the response that we give. And as soon as we respond differently, the dynamics in our family are going to change completely. One thing I just wanted to mention, which I didn't in the previous slide, is that co-regulation relies on us being regulated. So in order for us to be regulated, we need to take care of ourselves. And I just know that, sometimes that brings just a feeling of doom to people, because it is really difficult as a parent to find time for that as well. We want to be there for our children. We have so many things that need to be done. It is difficult to find time for our own regulation, but it is not only important, it is absolutely essential. We've seen how important that co-regulation is. So we need to be there, and we need to be that calm version of ourselves. But just because we need to do that doesn't mean we always will. So when we don't, and when we do react impatiently, or we do snap at them, or we do react in a way that we wish we hadn't, we need to have compassion for ourselves and model that to our child, because they are not going to always do things the way that they wish they had. So when they see that we can sort that out in the way that we do it, they will be better able to do that as well. I'm going to tell you very briefly about our workshops. These are ongoing, but we do have workshops beginning this week again. We've got a morning one and an evening one. The course that I created for these workshops is called Connections for Your Family, because to me, connection is what we are aiming for, creating that safe space where our child belongs in our family without needing to change themselves in any way. It consists of 6 online workshops, and it's a small group. It's a maximum of 10 parents. In week 1 and 2, we work on that understanding, putting those foundations in place, understanding what's going on with our child and what's going on for ourselves because of that whole thing with co-regulation. Week 3 and 4, we talk about communication. How can we do those actions differently? Again, how can we do it differently? And how can we help our young person to do it differently? It's all about giving them choice and working with them, collaborating with them. Week 5, we pull it all together as far as connection goes. And in week 6, we develop an action plan so that you go away with an action plan for what you're going to do in your family. This is not a prescriptive course. It's not a parenting course to make you feel guilty and that you wish you'd done it differently. It's just an opportunity to explore different ideas and to have a look at how you may be able to tweak certain things, how you can be reassured that you're doing lots of things well, and how you may want to explore doing some things differently. There is a lot of discussion in the workshops. There is a lot of reflection. Each week I ask you to take something away and then reflect on it the next week. And there's a lot of learning. We talk about all the kind of things that we've talked about in today's webinar. The early bird price has gone, but the normal price is £125 per person or couple. You can come as yourself or you can bring your partner along. It's great if there are two parents that they are able to kind of be working from the same kind of understanding. It makes it a lot easier for everybody. But if that's not the case, it doesn't mean that you on your own can't effect change. It is certainly, it is often the moms that I see, more and more dads, I have to say, which is brilliant, but often the moms that are coming along, and sometimes the dads can't make it at that time and the moms pass on the information. But if you come together, it's a great opportunity to talk things through together as well. The great thing is that there's another special offer on for you at the moment. If you sign up to the January-February workshops, you will be eligible to be a founding member of the Connections Community Hub when it launches in March. If you want to, there's no obligation, but for £10 a month instead of £25 a month, you'd be able to be part of this community, and that would give you access to other professionals who would be able to offer things for your family at a reduced rate. You would be able to get webinars, workshops, guest expert chats, and some reductions on working with me one-to-one as well. Oh, and I see my spelling mistake. That's awful in the bottom corner there. Apologies for that. So there's how you are able to reach us. We have a website, which is just Complex Connections, and I always point out connections with a double N and an X. We're on Facebook. You're welcome to email me anytime. I'm shelley@complexconnections.co.uk, and we have a free Facebook group as well that you would be able to join if you would like to. Again, in there, there's posts, there's lives, there's chatting, so you'd be able to join that if you would like to. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate you spending this time with me, and I hope that if you are the parent of a young person who is struggling in some way with behaviour and your family is feeling the effects of that, I hope that we may be able to connect sometime soon. Take care for now. Bye-bye.